Hey, it's Kyle here, and today I'll be reviewing The Hot Hand, The Mystery and the Science of Streaks by Ben Cohen. This is a little bit different nonfiction book for me than I normally read. Usually my nonfiction books are all about history or politics. This book is about sports, which I'm a huge sports fan. I just really don't read sports books that often. But I want to kind of tell you how I discovered this book and why I highly recommend it, because it is an amazing read. For long-time viewers of this channel, I've mentioned this before, so you might be aware of this, but I played basketball most of my life. One of my random facts about myself is I'm very tall. I'm 6'6", was always tall as a kid, so basketball naturally was kind of the sport I kind of gravitated to. So I've always loved basketball, loved playing it, and as an adult, work stuff, don't really get to play basketball much, but I still love watching it. And one of my favorite podcasts to listen to is The Low Post, which is a very popular basketball podcast hosted by Zach Lowe. And it kind of delves into the nerdier aspects of basketball, a lot of stat stuff, more analytical approaches to basketball, kind of focuses more on interviewing experts about the game instead of maybe focusing more on, like, here's what a current player is thinking, how the offensive and defenses work, that type of stuff. I just find it very interesting. And a while back, one of his podcasts was actually dedicated to the author of this book, Ben Cohen, and exploring the concept of the hot hand. Anybody that's played basketball or watched basketball is very familiar with the concept of the hot hand. I know I am. It's basically the idea is you're playing basketball and you get in the zone, you feel like you can't miss a shot. And that's what this book is, exploring the concept of the hot hand and if it's real or not. Really love this book, and one reason I love it, you don't really have to be in sports to enjoy this book, because the author explores the concept of the hot hand by looking at a variety of different topics. I mean, so wide-ranging. That's one thing they mentioned in the podcast, but even when we got in the book, it was even more wide-ranging than I was expecting. He looks at stuff like Shakespeare and how experts have kind of begun to realize that a lot of his works were written in very like a year or two period. Just like you'd get on a streak of really cranking out big hits. Then he'd have a little bit of a dry spell, and then a few years later he'd have a year or two and he'd crank out another series of hits. It explored some musicians who had a sudden creative burst of energy and would compose all their big hits over a course of a few months. And then, the rest of the career, downhill. Movie directors, scientists, spies, humanitarians, all sorts of fields, and also various athletic stuff, various sports, basketball and other sports as well. And it based all this explores why people think the hot hand is real and why scientists did not think the hot hand is real. It's very interesting. I will say there's a twist in it where the scientific opinion on what the hot hand is, if it's real, if it's not, why humans perceive the hot hand. It's very fascinating. So first off, if you're still having a struggle concept of what the hot hand is, just imagine something you do, either as a hobby or your job. Let's just say you play golf. Has there ever been, and you're an average golfer, and then one day you go play golf, and then you just have the most amazing game of your life, and you feel like you're in a zone. That's kind of the hot hand. Or let's just say, one of your passions is being a creative writer, and usually, there's a normal number of pages you write when you get to know work, but maybe you have that one day or a week or a month where you just suddenly crank out a huge amount of work, and you're just so satisfied with it. Or say you're at work and whatever you do in your job, and there's just one day or 1 week or 1 month where you just feel super productive and everything you do just feels like, oh, this is amazing, I really nailed this project. That's the hot hand. And if that concept has ever interested you, this book is going to explore that and kind of what is real about that, why humanity perceives the hot hand the way it does, and how it impacts how we approach everything in our lives, really. It's a very fascinating book, and this book is way more than just about sports. So I'm glad basketball inspired me to read this book, but I got a lot more out of it than sport-related stuff. There's some very interesting things about science, art, history that I learned through this book by exploring the concept of the hot hand. So I definitely highly recommend The Hot Hand by Ben Cohen. Highly recommend it. Read it. Read it. Read it. It's an amazing read. Let me know, has there been a book that you kind of read that on the nonfiction category that really surprised you? You learned more from it on different topics than you were expecting. If so, let me know in the comment section below. I'd be very curious to see some recommendations from you. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. If you have yet, please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate the support. And I hope to see you next time, and happy reading.